Was the Cambrian explosion not as explosive as we once thought? My friends, it's another beautiful day and time for part one of Paleo Rewind 2025, where we look at some of the most interesting papers published in June. To kick things off, we delve back in time to the Ediacaran period, where it appears that life was already becoming more complex and mobile preceding the Cambrian explosion. The Ediacaran is an interesting place in deep time, being the last period of the Phanerozoic eon before the Cambrian, which is known for things like Anomalocaris. However, in the Ediacaran, we rarely have preservation of body fossils, and the ones that we do have are very often ambiguous. What we do have, though, is an abundance of trace fossils, and Wang et al. 2025 capitalizes on this, using a quantitative method to test when slender, bilaterian-style animals first appeared. To do this, 111 trace fossil specimens from 12 different formations were analyzed, some of these specimens including Gordia, Helminthopsis, and Archaeonassa, spanning in time from the terminal Ediacaran to the early Cambrian. Using integral scale analysis, Wang et al. 2025 found that before roughly 545 million years ago, estimated body length to width ratios were typically small, with the trails showing abrupt turns and irregular paths. And it can be inferred that the trace makers likely had short, ovoid, or ellipsoidal bodies with limited directional control. But after 545 million years ago, we see those length to width ratios go up, with the trails becoming smoother, more directional, and less maneuverable, inferring that we had the emergence of slender, elongated bodies with bilateral organization. This would seem to show that slender, bilaterian-style animals began to appear before the Cambrian explosion, with these animals modifying the substrate they lived in, increasing ecological complexity, and enabling a cascading diversification of life, hinting that the Cambrian explosion reflects ecological amplification and not the sudden anatomical changes that we had previously thought. If you found this interesting, be sure to check out the paper below, drop a like, and follow for parts 2 and 3 of Paleo Rewind 2025. Until then, I hope you have a beautiful day. Did you hear the news? There's another new Tyrannosaurid. That's right, my friends, it's another beautiful day, and we're continuing coverage for the month of June with Paleo Rewind 2025. This time we're heading to late Cretaceous Mongolia, where a medium-sized Tyrannosaurid called Conculu mongoliensis was recently described from. First discovered in the 1970s, this newly described Tyrannosaurid is pretty groundbreaking, because it overturns decades of thinking of how the Tyrannosaurid family tree worked. But what was Conculu like in life? Well, by looking at the two partial skeletons found in the Cretaceous Bayan-Shiri Formation, Voris et al. 2025 describes it as a medium-sized Tyrannosaurid, much smaller than T-Rex itself, with a slender, lightly built body and long legs adapted for running. Its skull was also narrow. This sounds like a young Tyrannosaurid. However, certain bone features show that these individuals were fully grown. See, Conculu was placed just outside the Eutyrannosauria on the family tree, making it the closest known relative to the giant tyrannosaurs. You can think of it as the last step before they got really big. So what's the big takeaway from this new species? Well, aside from the fact that a new tyrannosaur is always cool, this changes the old view of tyrannosaur relations, with the old view that shallow-snouted tyrannosaurs were more primitive than deep-snouted ones like T-Rex. Instead, Voris et al. 2025 suggests that Alioramini and Tyrannosaurini are sister groups that both evolved from a similar ancestor, similar to our friend Conculu here. Conculu proves that our knowledge of tyrannosaur evolution is ever-changing. If you found this interesting, be sure to drop a like and a follow for more coverage of Paleo Rewind 2025. Until then, I hope you have a beautiful day. It's time for everyone's favorite archaeological controversy. That's right, the date for earliest human habitation in the Americas got pushed back by 9,000 years in June of this year. But how did we go from arrival 14,000 years before present to 23,000 years before the present? It's all thanks to these amazingly preserved footprints in White Sands National Park, New Mexico. Found on the eastern margin of Paleo Lake Otero in the Tularosa Basin, these footprints would have been formed not in the desert that southern New Mexico is today, but in a much more marshy environment full of megafaunal life like mammoths and ground sloths. We've also found their footprints and their poop preserved there as well. So how did we get that date? Holliday et al. 2025 used accelerator mass spectrometry, or AMS, to radiocarbon date samples of the preserved mud in which the footprints were found, as well as rupia seeds and pollen from the sedimentary layers. They also checked and confirmed for stratigraphic consistency, meaning that older dates occurred lower in the sedimentary layers and younger ones occurred higher. So why is this important? Because not only do these findings provide direct evidence of a much earlier human occupation in the Americas, but it also shows just how drastically different our planet was just a short time ago. Geologically speaking, of course. If you found this paper interesting, give it a read in the link below, and be sure to drop a like and a follow for more paleo and archaeology content. As always, I hope you have another beautiful day.